which I am telling, it is of 3 years duration. He will incorporate one doctor simultaneously in the autopsy table, all the knowledges together to solve or to give a particular opinion. Next. So one doctor was referring regarding the Goa murder case that the body is scarlet, her body is going for 2-3 times second autopsy, third autopsy, all those things. And let me tell you, if the body goes to 5-10 different doctors, it is not like your fingerprints. If 15 doctors examine a particular fingerprint, they will give a particular opinion. If a body goes to 15 different doctors, that too in a decomposed state, 15 different doctors will give 15 different opinions. There is a problem with this object. It is a biological science. Unexpected results are always there. Even a surgeon, until he opens the abdomen, he doesn't know what is there. We know all ultrasound, everything. Until the abdomen is opened, we never know what is there inside. It all depends on the probability. Okay, we can presume that, yes, it may be there. So absolute conclusions, like the lawyers, like the judges, they expect absolute results. It is totally not, it is not safe. Next, please. We'll come to the first few examples. One is determination of age. It is determined. You know the importance why it is determined. Usually it is determined from the external appearance. We can say that is old aged, young, middle aged, all those things. Also we depend on the certificates. Matriculation. You see here, these are the broken, some dark lines are here. And the number of bones here, it should be 8, here it is 7. So the age is determined from this one. The age is more than 6 years, 7 years, and it is less than 12 years. Because at the age of 12 years, this one, it will become 1 bone. By 12 years, here 8 bones will appear. Next. This is a normal adult pelvis, hip bone. Here, these are the complete bones. Next, please. This one, you can see the lines here. One broken line is here, fragmented line. Here one is there. Here one more is there. Here the ages. This one appears at the age of 4 to 5 years. This one, okay, this one, 13 years almost, it becomes 1 bone. From these things, we can determine the age that it is more than 6 to 7 years and less than 13 years. So we cannot give a, suppose this X-ray is there, no doctor can tell that this is 9 or 10, 10.5, 11, it is simply impossible. Next please. Again all those things, that depends on the nutritional status. The person is, how much he is taking his foods, habits, calcium intake, all those things. Genetics, heredity, and the metabolism, calcium metabolism, mineral metabolism, all those things. So if we consider all those things to give a particular opinion like that the age is 17 or 18, simply it will become simply impossible. Next. The body is skeletonized. Most of the times we will get skeletonized bodies. No tissues will be available. The body is in jungle forest. The body comes for autopsy. Here we will determine the sex of the individual. Unless that is there, we don't know whether that is a male or a female. The principle we follow is that the female skeleton, especially the pelvis, that is biologically designed or adapted for childbirth and pregnancy. All the parameters there in the pelvis, it will be broad. And the males, because they are known to work hard, muscle works, they are all the, where the muscle fuses with the bone, that will become prominent. It will be rough, muscular. Next please. This is one body. Here there is no external genitalia, no like external genitalia, internal, that is the uterus, prostate, penis, all those things, nothing is there. Not even the breast, nothing is there. This is skeleton. Next please. This is the, from the skull, how we determine the age, sex. The upper one is a male one. The first, this one you can see, this is more prominent here, this is not prominent here. This is one indicator. Then this one, this is called the mastoid process. This is larger in males, longer, larger, stouter in males. This is very small, short in females. And there is no exact measurement. Suppose like if it is more than 5 centimeters or 6 centimeters, it will be male, or it will be, if it is less, there is no such measurements, because that depends on the skull size, hair size. The child, obviously there will be differences. So there is no such things. Next please. This is the mandible. Upper one is a male. You can see the squarish chin. This is the chin, this one, this portion. This is roundish. This is again not reliable. Next please. This is the hip bone. This is the most important one to determine the sex. You can see the angle here. This is called the greater sciatic notch. The notch. If this is male, because the angle is very less. This is a female because the angle is wide. And there is no such thing that this should be this much degree. There is no mathematical sexing. It is impossible from the bones. Like everybody tells, no, this is infallible, most accurate. Here in biology, this is, see, you cannot, it all depends on the probabilities. I have already told you. Next please. Another is time is death, time of death, when the person died. That is sometimes useful to link the accused with the crime. Principle is the decomposition, it starts immediately after death and it follows a sequential pattern. Next please. The first one is post-mortem cooling. After death, the body cools. It is, the mathematics is simple. How much the body has already lost heat divided by the rate of loss. That gives an approximate idea about when the person died. But again, this depends on the cloth, fat contents of the body, when he died, in the morning hours, evening hours, daytime, what is the temperature, humidity, all those things. Then whether the wind was blowing or not, so many things it depends. Next is the body stiffens. Again, it depends on so many factors, like how much, what are the works he was doing, whether he was nervous or not, so many factors. Next please. Coming to the injury, time of assault from the healing, usually it is asked, suppose the injury case is there or the post-mortem case is there, they'll ask, what is the time of injury? Usually it is determined from the healing of the wounds. The problem here is, if the person is suffering from vitamin deficiencies, diabetes, all those things, the healing is retarded. Coming to the weapon of assault, there are so many problems, because usually the doctor's first priority is to save the life of the person. It happened to JFK John, that Kennedy, US president, when he was shot dead, the doctor who saw him first, what he did is, he first cleaned the wound. Because his first aim is not to collect the evidences, his first aim is how to save the life. So he cleaned everything, saved everything. So what happened? What was the entry wound, what was the exit wound? They could not determine. From which angle, it was very difficult to determine the Kennedy assassination. Coming to the disease, all those things, usually we have to ignore, because the law, everybody is they are more concerned about whether the injury itself is fatal or not. They are not concerned with the disease. Coming to the born charred bodies, so many injuries. Sometimes the body is, they'll be killing by some means and they'll throw the body into fire to destroy the evidence. Most of the evidences, they'll be destroyed by fire. Still, we have to see whether the person was alive when he was born by seeing into the trachea, the shoots, then the color of the blood, if it is there, the color of the tissues, because the blood, when combines with carbon monoxide, it forms some different color, cherry red color. Next please. Drowning. This case, particular case, that Goa murder case, the body was, I don't know exactly the case. If it is the body is drowned, all the injuries, the features, it is very, very difficult to determine. And the longer the body is inside the water, the more difficult it will be to opine about the cause of death or something else. I have told you already, if the body is inside the water, the body is killed by throttling, whatever means. The putrefaction, it will be rapid, and the body, if it goes to 5 different doctors, 10 different doctors, they will give 10 different opinions. Next please. Infanticide. We have to determine whether the first is the baby was born alive, like in English law. They presume that all the newborns are presumed to be born dead unless proved otherwise. Infanticide, there cannot be any case. The first thing you have to prove is the baby was born alive. The first one is, it is respiration. Next. Sex.
Let us understand what the DNA is. Next slide. DNA is called as the deoxyribonucleic acid, and it is said to be the universal genetic molecule except some retroviruses like the HIV or GMV, where RNA is going to be the genetic material. Next slide. And DNA, along with the nucleoproteins, it is found in the chromosomes of eukaryotes. Of course, in prokaryotes also we get the DNA, but it is without the nuclear proteins. And it controls all the metabolic activities of a cell, and it also catalyzes the enzymes, as well as it regulates almost all the physiological activities in the cell. And every character of an organism is solely controlled by the DNA molecule. Next slide. And this is the place where the DNA is present. This is the outline of the cell where the nucleus is present at the center, and this nucleus is having the genetic material in the form of chromosomes, and number of chromosomes, they vary from one individual to another individual, and within this chromosome the DNA is going to be present. Next slide. And these are the 3 persons who were awarded the Nobel Prize in the year 1962 for unveiling the molecular structure of the DNA in the year 1953, but the Nobel Prize was awarded in the year 1962. And one more lady who was very much involved in the investigation of or unveiling the structure of the DNA molecule was Rosalind Franklin, but she died before this 1962 when this Nobel Prize was awarded, and her name was excluded from the names of the Nobel laureates. And this is the structure of the DNA molecule, and here the cell is shown, and the cell consists of number of chromosomes, and if you get into the cell you will get a thread of molecular thread which is known as the DNA molecule. And as per the Watson and Crick, this is the structure of the DNA molecule, which is compared to a spiral staircase, which can be exactly compared to the spiral staircase, and it has got 2 backbones which can be compared to the handrails of the staircase, and the nucleotide sequences or the nitrogenous bases which are present between the 2 strands of the DNA molecule, which can be compared to the rungs in the spiral staircase. And the total length of the DNA molecule which covers in one guide is about 34 angstrom units, and it consists of 10 base pairs, and the distance between 2 base pairs is 3.4 angstrom units. And it has got 4 nitrogenous bases called as adenine, purine, adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine, which are later classified into purines and pyrimidines, which exactly controls the all physiological as well as the every character in an individual. Next slide. And this is the molecular structure of the DNA, wherein you will be able to see the pentose sugar, and number of pentose sugars are linked by the phosphodiester bond which forms the backbone of the DNA, and 2 DNA molecules, so the 2 rails of the DNA molecules are connected by the nitrogenous bases purines and pyrimidines, and these purines and pyrimidines are linked by number of hydrogen bonds, and there will be 2 hydrogen bonds in between adenine and thymine, and 3 hydrogen bonds between guanine and cytosine. Next slide. Please go up. Yeah, this is the DNA is said to be negatively charged because of the presence of the phosphate, and this net negative charge present on the DNA molecule is used. This property is utilized to separate the small pieces of the DNA molecules during the electrophoresis, which is very important step in the developing the DNA fingerprints, and these are the structures of adenine, guanine, thymine and cytosine which describes the life. Next slide. Please go ahead. Now we will enter into the DNA fingerprinting. This is about the basic introduction to the DNA molecule, and this DNA is universally present as the genetic molecule except for retroviruses. And if you come back to the DNA fingerprinting, this is the photograph of Sir John Alec Jeffrey, who described the role of DNA fingerprinting in forensic sciences. And this is the VNTR sequence, and this is the fluorescent fluorochrome. It is actually the fluorochrome which is called as the ethidium bromide, which intercalates between the two strands of the DNA molecule. When this stained DNA molecule is irradiated against the ultraviolet light, it gives the orange colored fluorescence, and when this orange colored fluorescence is transferred over to the X-ray sensitive film, you will find the DNA fingerprints as the barcode which is seen on any grocery item. Next slide. And you know, this discovery, Jeffrey would make his discoveries at 9 a.m. Monday, September 15, 1984, when he stumbled on a method of determining the human's genetic identification, and by afternoon he named this technology as the DNA fingerprint technology. And you know, the first practical application of this technology came in 1985 during an immigration dispute of a Ghana individual. And later in 1986, Jeffrey's discovery was to be used forensically to solve the rape and murder of two 15-year-old girls in Enderby, England. And since then, DNA evidences has been used to both free as well as immigration suspects. And FBI in the year 1998, they have developed a system called as CODIS, Combined DNA Index Systems, in the year 1998, where DNA fingerprints data of all the American individuals is maintained. Next slide. And what exactly this DNA fingerprint is? And you know, it's a print of DNA fragments isolated from an individual which resembles the barcode of any grocery item. And everyone's DNA has the same chemical structure. Here, I'd like to say that the chemically, all the DNA molecule of any source, it is similar and there is no change as far as its chemical constitution is concerned. And the only difference between the individuals is the order of the base pairs. And 99% of the similarity is there among all the individuals, but the difference between the individuals is lying at 0.01% of the DNA molecule which we are using for developing the DNA fingerprints. And there are so many millions, say about 3 into 10 raised to 9 base pairs are there in each person's DNA, that every person has a different sequence. The number remains same, but the order of its appearance, order of the appearance of these nucleotide bases, it changes from one individual to another individual. And this is the exact DNA fingerprint of the 7 suspectees and the deceased individual. And if you look at the homology between the strands or the bands, DNA bands present in the suspectee number 3 and the deceased individual, you can say that the criminal can be easily traced out depending upon the presence or the absence of the DNA bands. Next slide. And why this DNA fingerprinting is used? You know, unlike a conventional fingerprint that occurs only on the fingertips and can be altered or modified by surgery, a DNA fingerprint is the same for every tissue and organ of a person. It cannot be altered by any known treatment. So, the DNA fingerprint it is said to be very unique for an individual. And the term fingerprint is used to indicate its uniqueness. Next slide. And you know, since the total number of nucleotide bases present in an individual, it is up to it is about 3 into 10 raised to 9 base pairs. The analysis of all these nucleotide base pairs is a very difficult task and time consuming. So we have an alternative system for this, so that wherein we are going to utilize these VNTRs. VNTR stands for variable number tandem repeats. And you know, this variable number tandem repeats, the sequence or the number of variable these VNTRs are going to change from one individual to another individual, and this difference we are making use for the development of the fingerprints. Next slide. And you know, there is another, this is the shortcut method where VNTRs are being used. Next slide. Using these VNTRs, every person could be identified solely by the presence or the absence of a particular VNTR. This is exactly the VNTR, 2 VNTRs have been analyzed for the analysis of 6 DNA fingerprints. And you know, these VNTR locus most commonly results in a 2-band pattern and 1-band pattern inherited from each of the parents. And a 1-band pattern can occur if the size of the 2 parental bands are the same or nearly the same. And for our simple example of 3 different alleles designated as A, B, C, these are the 3 alleles which are going to reappear here, and in the first individual will have both B VNTR as well as C VNTR, whereas the second individual is having only one VNTR which is C VNTR, and the third individual is having both A as well as B, and the fourth individual is represented by only the B VNTR, and another A and C VNTRs are present in the 5th individual, and the 6th one is having only A VNTR. And these are the 6 probabilities of having 3 genotypes in 6 individuals. The first individual is having genotype B and C, wherein these 2 VNTRs are represented as a B as well as a C band, and in the second individual both the alleles are present in the homozygous condition, so that these 2 VNTRs are going to be represented as a single band. Okay, and again the third individual is heterozygous in its allele, heterozygous with respect to these ABC, A and B, so that 2 bands are going to be noticed in the third individual, and again the fourth individual is having the homologous allele for B, and it is represented as a single unit. Okay, like that the presence or the absence of the particular VNTR is going to be scored for the analysis of the criminal with the help of DNA fingerprints. And these patterns of VNTRs do not, however, give an individual's DNA fingerprint. In the sense, it doesn't give the overall idea of the genetic material present in an individual, but it gives only the data with which we can determine whether 2 DNA samples are from the same person or related person or the unrelated person. In order to record the differences or the similarities between the 2 individuals, the banding patterns are going to be compared. Okay, sir. Please go ahead. And DNA profiles vary from person to person. Please go ahead. These are all the some information regarding the VNTRs. Please go up. This how this DNA fingerprinting is done. There are 5 different steps are involved. The first one is the isolation of the DNA, and we are using some detergents in order to isolate the DNA molecule. Next slide. Please go ahead. There are so many different steps are involved in the DNA isolation. Second step could be the cutting of the DNA molecule with the restriction endonucleases to break the large molecule of the DNA into a number of fragments, and we are utilizing the property of the restriction endonucleases, which will have the restriction sites on the DNA molecule, and this is the way how these restriction enzymes are going to cut the DNA molecule. This is the electrophoresis unit by which we are separating the DNA bands. Next slide. This is the how this electrophoresis is being done, and these number of DNA bands are going to be separated based on the net charge present on them. Next slide. The third step is, next slide, southern blotting, where the DNA is going to be transferred from the agarose gel onto the nitrocellulose paper in order to give a stabilized base for the nucleic acid hybridization, and the number of probes are being used in order to hybridize the DNA molecules present on the nitrocellulose paper. So finally the DNA fingerprint is developed by reading the autoradiography, and this picture or the image has been it is going to be captured over the X-ray sensitive film. The next go up. The probing, this is nucleic acid hybridization, where the number of radioactively labeled probes are being used, and the number of probes depends upon the identity or the similarities present between the deceased individual as well as the suspecting. Next slide. And this is about this slide shows the integration or the base complementarity of the probes and with the native DNA molecule. Next, and based on the type of the conformation of the probing, we can divide this probing into 3 categories as great homology, less homology, and low homology, whereas in the great homology all the nucleotide bases present in the probe they are very much complementary to the DNA present on the in the suspect is DNA molecule. Here in less homology, number of nucleotide bases are going to change with respect to their pairing. Here the G has been paired with the T, whereas here also G has been paired with the T, but G is supposed to pair with the C, which is guanine cytosine. And in less homology, number of nucleotide bases will have a mismatching. And the last step in the next slide is the last step in the DNA fingerprint development is the RFLP analysis, where after the probing the nucleic acid hybridization, the radioactivity is going to be captured over the nitrocellulose paper, and that is going to be developed in future. Next slide. And this is about the RFLP analysis. Some points are there, and this is the human karyotype, where this is a human female karyotype because there are 2 X chromosomes. And this is exactly how this DNA fingerprint looks like. And these are some applications in the applications of this DNA fingerprinting. This DNA fingerprinting can be used in the criminal detection, personal identification, protecting our IPRs, intellectual property rights, paternity and maternity testing, diagnosis and developing cures for the inherited disorders. And these are some of the cases where this DNA fingerprint has been developed in administration of the justice. Next slide. Go up. Please go up. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you very much. This is a very
I assure you I won't take more than 10 minutes, and not just because we've run out of time, but also because I have a train to catch to Mysore in less than 2 hours. So I'll be talking about a topic called as forensic odontology. So basically it is how teeth and how dentists can be useful in forensic and criminal investigation. I believe we can help, and we can help in quite a big way. Next one please. A very simple definition of forensic odontology or forensic dentistry is that it's a combination of law and dentistry. Next. So we may define forensic odontology as that branch of dentistry which deals with the law. Now there are some major applications of forensic odontology, and most important is in identification of post-mortem remains. So under post-mortem identification, we have two subdivisions. The first is called as comparative identification, and the second is called as reconstructive identification. Under reconstructive identification, we have sex assessment and age estimation. And last but not the least, we have bite mark investigation. I'll briefly touch upon all these aspects. First, starting with post-mortem identification. As I said, we do both comparative identification as well as reconstructive identification. Now, why are teeth important in identification? Now, death is such an incident that sometimes it changes the way we look. And we may not be able to identify a person by just looking at that person's face. So visual identification is probably not appropriate. And there are instances when parents have actually misidentified their own children. So we try to depend on some scientific methods of identification, where people like us, unbiased, unconnected with the family, try to identify the dead. So trauma, decomposition, burns, skeletal remains can all be identified using the teeth. Now I'd like to just quote Dr. Nidhi Srivastava and Dr. Mughali earlier, who said that faces can lie but fingerprints do not. And also Dr. Mughali said that fingerprints are highly individualistic. So from a dental point of view, faces may lie but teeth do not, and teeth are highly individualistic. What that means is each and every one of us has a unique set of dentition. How that is unique, I'll tell a little later. Next slide, please. Now, teeth are so useful in forensic identification, in post-mortem identification, because they are considered to be the most strong structures in the body, the strongest structures in the body. And that allows them to resist post-mortem insults. Now, comparative identification involves trying to compare the dental evidence recovered post-mortem with treatment records of the suspected deceased. As living individuals, most of us have had dental problems, and we probably would have gone to a dentist for treatment. The dentist would have made a record of the treatment, and we use that record to compare with the teeth of the dead person. That way we try to match the two. Next slide, please. So very simply put, we look at the teeth of the dead person, and then taking the dental evidence recovered post-mortem, we try to compare it with the dental record. The dental record you see here is a kind of a cast of the dentition, but it can also be in the form of x-rays, it can be in the form of written notes also. In essence, comparing the ante-mortem dental records to the post-mortem dental evidence allows us to identify the individual. Next, please. Now, this is a very unique characteristic which would be very useful in trying to identify an individual. But I don't think we could expect to find such a highly individual character in any one of us. So what we do is we try to look at the combination of intact teeth, the decayed teeth, filled teeth, and missing teeth. This combination, the permutation and combination of intact, missing, decayed, and filled teeth is considered to be unique. 1.8 into 10 actually go for a comparative identification. For example, if a person dies in a car accident and the face is badly burned, we can try to look at the number plate or the license from the person and try to go and get the dental records. But in case of skeletal remains, where we have virtually no clue as to what the identity of the person is, we have to try and reconstruct the person's identity. So what we do mainly is try to assess the sex and age. So sex assessment from the teeth can be used as a corroborative tool, not as a definitive tool, mind you, but as a corroborative tool. Next slide, please. So what we do is we try to measure the teeth of individuals. In general, male dentition is considered to be larger than the female teeth. And the accuracy of correct sex identification is about 80%. So it's not 100%, and therefore we cannot use it as a definitive tool in sex identification, only as a corroborative tool. Next slide, please. We can also estimate the age from the teeth. We can either use histology, that is look at the inside of the tooth, or we can also look at X-rays. Next slide, please. So this is a figure of how a tooth looks when it is sliced right down the middle. So what I would like you all to appreciate is this, called as transparency or translucency in the root of the tooth. Remember, what you're able to see inside your mouth is the crown of the tooth. What's hidden beneath the gums is the root. The root is supposed to become transparent as age progresses.